Well, good morning, Ethan. Thanks for taking the time to meet with me. Let's start with kind of a high altitude question. Why is music important in the public schools?
Why is what?
Music important in the public schools?
Music is important in public schools because not only do students get to learn about other cultures and other artistic nuances, but they also end up learning a set of skills that are not probably not on the forefront of your brain when you think of a music classroom necessarily. Some of these skills include timeliness, accountability, and independent learning. That can also especially be seen in like a marching program, for example, where there's a lot of self-accountability. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So how is that facilitated in a music classroom?
How's it facilitated?
Mm-hmm. How do we get, if that's the outcome, how does music education get you there?
I'm trying to understand.
So
the
maybe
question.
some
Sorry.
examples of what happens in the music classroom that would lead to time management or accountability and those kinds of things you mentioned.
Certainly. So, as far as time management and accountability are concerned, so like let's say I'm just going to keep using the analogy maybe of athletic bands within maybe a marching band program or even a basketball band, where there's a regimented schedule that the students would need to show up for. They would need to assemble their instruments by a certain time, be at their call times by specific times. As far as self-accountability is concerned, each individual will be responsible for their own music, and knowing those parts and showing up with those ready to go. There's no flub, there's no flex as far as that's concerned. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So with that in mind, describe your qualifications for teaching music.
One more time.
Describe your qualifications for teaching
qualifications. I've been playing, like as a musician, I've been playing really before I could speak, but I've also, over time, obviously, I've grown as a musician, and I've also acquired students over time. I've taught private lessons. I have, over the last decade, I have been working already kind of in public schools under subcontracts and for like various band camps. I've worked with Bueller High School's marching program. I've worked with DeSoto High School's marching program and their concert programs, actually, as well as their choirs. I've worked with Blue Valley North's jazz groups, as well as some of their marching program endeavors as well. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. So, what would you describe as your weakest area in teaching? How do you plan to address that?
My weakest area in teaching. Honestly, probably my use of proximity needs work. But I do plan on counteracting that by honestly just making things more interesting, moving around the room a little bit more, engaging students in participating more in that music making process, modeling more from the student's perspective as well, on other instruments as well. Does that make sense?
So when you say proximity, be more specific. What do you mean?
So with proximity, I think that being able to move around the room, being able to utilize as much space as possible is important. I think it keeps interest when giving a lesson, whether it be from a lecture standpoint or even an activity standpoint. Not unlike where maybe your English teacher might move around the room and see how students are working and whatnot. I feel like that can be done also during the lesson and be very effective in doing so.
Okay. So we have a minimal budget for music. How would you fund your program in this district?
So I also recognize that a single director cannot necessarily do everything, and that community support is important. Not just from a financial level, maybe necessarily, but also from a social level as well. Like to make it meaningful for the community. So with that, I do plan on keeping a booster program available, as well as a volunteer program available for interested parents. Within my handbook, actually, I have a variety of forms that I've already stamped out as far as that is concerned. Just information forms and potential job opportunities for interested parents. I think that through having a set of bylaws to protect that program as well, I think it can be very successful. So,
excellent. So why would you be a successful teacher?
I think that I would be a successful teacher because I not only, as far as a creating the most rounded student from that standpoint, I think that I'm able to relate music to a variety of other disciplines as well, both within the arts and outside of the arts. I've designed a lot of different interdisciplinary lesson plans, as well as lesson plans for students that maybe struggle in literacy in some other content areas as well, such as language, whether that be English or not. And really, my goal is to give students not just the tools to be successful in music, but in life later on so that they can contribute to society once they leave my classroom. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So, how would you? Well, let me ask you this. So, you have some sample lesson plans?
I do. So, at the micro level, if we're just looking at lesson plans, this is an example of an elementary level lesson plan. This is just basically teaching students the difference between duple and triple meter. Later in the lesson, students will end up not only working with language because there are words to these nursery rhymes that these elementary school students would be learning, but there's also musical literacy components as well within dictation of those musical ideas of those nuances. At the secondary level, another literacy assistance lesson would be I've actually put together a sight reading masterclass. Sight reading being the first time that a student looks at a piece of music on staff paper for the first time, and key things to look for before they read something for the first time. Not unlike in an English classroom, where when you have students that are first learning maybe words even, or they start as words within a language, and then eventually those develop into sentences. You learn your grammar. In that same light, you can relate a lot of these things to developmental levels in music as well. There's a babble stage. They learn how to create musical sentences eventually. Then those phrases become longer into paragraphs, etc. Is there anything else that
No,
you'd like to see?
Good. Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
So, describe your classroom management philosophy.
Classroom management, is that what you said? So, my philosophy is that as long as students are engaged and not um, causing any major disruptions, if you will. No, they're getting along. Nothing. There's no destruction of property or anything like that, if that makes sense. But there's contributions to the learning process. I feel that that is a successful classroom. In that, if you keep students engaged, they don't necessarily have time to misbehave, if you will. As far as that is also concerned, I do have some other rules or expectations for students. At every class, students will have a pencil at every rehearsal. This is important, not just because they're in a school setting, but also because there are little nuances that before we play certain things, they might need little reminders to mark their music. I have a lot of macro rules, if that makes sense, that involve respect and accountability. And with those, there are a lot of things that follow. Respect being maybe a core value from some other places that I have taught at. And having a set of core values, I also believe, is very important for students because there's a lot of things that fall under the umbrella.
Gotcha. Okay. Good. All right, let's stop there.